Well, we're here with Chris Berger. You are acting mayor of Parksville.
Yes, sir.
And I understand that you are running for mayor again.
Yes, sir.
The doctor says you're not getting enough stress in your diet.
Yeah, it can be stressful, and I've certainly lost a few nights of sleep and a lot of hair, apparently. But it's also one of the most rewarding things you could ever do. It really is.
Let's talk a little bit about your background.
Okay. So I grew up in the area,
Yeah.
about 30 years now, a little over. Met my wife here in Oceanside. We've been married for about 16 years, and we live in Parksville. I've lived in Parksville for about a decade, and this is where we're raising our children. And we love this city. We love everything that it offers to us, and we plan on staying for a long time.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit now about your accomplishments, the things that you think that you have accomplished in your last round as acting mayor. And it's been a very short period of time, eh? Since when?
Since January.
Since January.
That's right. So in January, I was appointed as the acting mayor after our current mayor had resigned, and that was through council, of course. And we did have a very busy number of months. We knew that going in. That was one of the reasons why we wanted to get back on track and back working on behalf of the residents and the citizens here. Some of the things that I'm most proud of is the rebuilding of our organization. Really, quite frankly, our engineering and operations department especially was in very rough shape. We had lost most of our senior management there. And of course, it was starting to really affect our ability to manage and function as a city. So I made it a very clear goal very early on from day one to rebuild that department. And we did. We brought in some great people from a number of places, going as far afield as California in a very difficult environment. Right now, because of demographics, we have many more positions available in local government, for instance, than qualified people to fill them. So you're in a very competitive environment, and that's why we had to go again, even to the United States, to find the right suitable candidate. And we're very pleased with the new folks that have joined us, and we're kind of back on track now, and the city's in good shape moving forward. And the other real goal, too, was to establish our better security and control over our water sources through the Aerosmith Water Service. We had a governance structure that just wasn't working for the city. And so we went and actually negotiated a new governance model, which ensured that the city maintained majority control, because we're the majority user, of course, of that service. And I'm very proud of that, because that really sets the stage as we move forward and tackle what is one of our biggest issues, which is how do we secure a long-term water supply.
Yeah, water is going to be more important than gold. And that leads into our discussion of what the major issues are over this next coming term. The 4 or 5 issues that you think are going to dominate the scene?
Well, you're absolutely right. Water is probably number one in terms of our viability and the longevity of our community, our city. And we're in a tough spot. We are reliant upon well fields and, of course, the river as our main sources of water. And our well fields are already basically at capacity. In fact, they're even showing some signs of a general decline. And in regard to our surface water, our river, the changing rules, the legislation is telling us that we will have to start treating it. Right now, we're just disinfecting. And that means we have to build infrastructure, big infrastructure, what I've been calling for some time now, a mega project, which is a new treatment center, a new intake site, and ultimately that's going to be a real challenge for us as a community. But if we don't, we're looking at a very uncertain future. And certainly, that's not something that I want to see us move into. We need security, we need stability moving forward. 3 ways to approach this, and the first is conservation. And we're very proud of the work that we've done with the Aquastar program, and boy, have our residents responded. We saw a 25% reduction in the first year in terms of water use, and I'm told now with the latest numbers, they haven't been completely refined, but another 7% to add on top of that in the second year. That's exactly the right thing to be doing. And it's also mandatory if we're going to go to senior governments to help us pay for all of this infrastructure. We've got a really exciting opportunity with aquifer storage and recovery. We've done a lot of study and a really hard look at the 13 aquifers that we ultimately are comprised of within our Aerosmith Water Service area. And we have an ideal aquifer suited for this type of technology, where you're taking water from the river during winter when we have plenty, and you're actually storing it inside an already established aquifer in the ground once you've treated it and made sure it's safe to go in. And then in the summertime, which is also the time when we see peak demand and a minimal amount of supply, because the river gets very low, obviously, then we can rely on that water. And that is a first for British Columbia if we're able to move forward on this. What our indications are so far is that it's very likely that we can. We have the right sorts of conditions here. We have to prove that out with a test drilling program now. We've got grant applications in for 1.35 million to allow us to do that. And if that part of it is successful, that's going to allow us to build a smaller treatment plant and help reduce some of these costs that we're facing. Some 50 million plus over the next 40 years in developing this infrastructure. So it's important that we try to do everything we can to minimize that, obviously, because of the costs associated with that.
All right, well, let's talk now about the OCP.
And that leads me to actually the third component, and it ties directly to the OCP, and that's looking at our growth and development as a whole.
Yeah.
Right now, our OCP essentially is charting a path, and it's very much based on the 1994 OCP, which also charted a path for us to grow to about 25,000 people as a city. That's more than twice our current size. And it's certainly, in my view, not something we can sustain with the resource base that we have here. Not even that, but also financially, because as you grow, your costs continue to go up, up, and up. And when we hit
the funding formula changes, doesn't it? Over 15,000?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Policing is a big topic. It's been in the news a lot lately. The moment we hit 15,000 people, we're going to see a 20% reduction in the grants that we receive to pay for policing. And that is going to...
That doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that?
Well, they provide grants for smaller communities. But once a community reaches a certain size, they start to reduce those levels of grants. And so this is what we face. And that would be a 6 to 7% probably tax increase right there. That's not adding a single police officer. That's not changing anything that we're doing. It's just that we're having to pay more for it. So these sorts of things we have to look at. There's the Pollution Control Center. No one talks about that, but our Pollution Control Center in French Creek is getting close to capacity. It's going to require upgrades. These are all growth related.
Yeah.
And guess who's going to pay for that at the end of the day? Taxpayers and to some extent developers. But that's even there, we have to start looking at our developer cost charges and actually maybe bring those up as well. So the best thing that we can do right now is to listen to what our community has told us through the citizen survey, and that is to take a very slow and gradual approach to growth, be very careful in how we manage growth. I'm not suggesting we're putting gates up. I'm not suggesting that we want to stagnate as a community, but we want an official community plan that reflects that, and it also reflects the realities that we face. And also an official community plan that's not nearly as aggressive on our waterfront, because that's always been a very important topic to the people here. So getting all this done is going to be up to the mayor and council in the next 3 years. And that's why it's such a pivotal time for us.
All right, the next thing for us to talk about is the contracting services and some of the other issues surrounding that. I mean, it's a big thing because it's all, again, part of infrastructure and things that have to be built. And
there's already been in this campaign some talk about how we contract out too much. And so that is actually part of an overall strategy that we're undertaking. Our goal is to keep our organization, the city's organization, as lean as we can because it does cost a lot every time you add new staff people. And the best way to do that is to have a combination of staffing and, of course, contracting out some additional services when the work is here and that we need to undertake. So as opposed to, for instance, hiring an additional engineer or hiring additional staff so we could take on some big projects that we're facing, we will go to third parties and contract some of that out. McMillan is a major infrastructure project that we're undertaking right now. We went to a local engineering firm, excuse me,
okay.
We went to a local engineering firm to ultimately provide some of the engineering on it. And that allows us to keep our engineering department, lean without having to add more and more people to it. And we do that with our official community plan review, for instance, going to a third party with experience and specialized skills in those areas to provide some assistance for us. That way, when the work isn't there, we're able to actually pull back. We don't have to continue to contract to third parties. And if you go the other route and you just keep adding staff, well, those staff are here and they're not going anywhere. And that's not the right approach. So that's really our focus there in terms of the organization.
What other contracting issues are there?
Well, let's take a look at, for instance, traffic. We don't have, again, because we're a small organization, we don't have a specialized traffic engineer on staff, and nor do I think we want to add one. So when we're redesigning an intersection or we're looking at issues like, for instance, with Family Place and trying to figure out a way to get traffic to flow there safely and conveniently, we will go to a traffic engineering firm to provide us some of that expertise. So that's another example.
Hang on a minute. A traffic engineer at a city our size would be a crossing guard?
Well, you'd be surprised. We have challenges with our traffic networks, and they go back decades. And it's amazing to me because I've experienced this over quite a number of years in public service. You make one little change in one place, you'd be amazed how it can affect things very far away just by diverting traffic flows. So you do need to have a look at how to do that properly. It's not good leadership to just jump in willy-nilly and think, oh, this is the solution, and then you spend all this money on infrastructure and it's not working, right? And then you're scratching your head going, gee, I'm sorry. So you have to look at this very carefully, and that's just another example.
All right, well, let's, in conclusion, talk a bit about the overall economy and how that's going to affect the city of Parksville, both federally and provincially, because, there are some things that are sort of out of our control, and the way that we respond to those things are going to be very important, right?
Absolutely, and it does make you nervous in a position like this because it is essentially out of your control in terms of the greater economic condition. And when you hear senior governments talking about further cutbacks and talking about bigger deficits than they had originally thought, and we have a provincial government, for instance, that's talking that way, you know very well that that's going to mean that you get less support at the local level, and that's something that local governments have been concerned about for years. Every year, it seems we're getting less and less support, and at the same time being asked to do more and more. And it becomes very hard to manage. So
a lot of the larger cities are in terrible condition in terms of infrastructure. They're going to be demanding a lot of those resources.
They are.
And Toronto and Vancouver.
Infrastructure in general is not in very good shape clear across the country. And when you think about the taxes you pay, and I'm talking about everything from income tax to sales tax, 92% go to senior governments. Only 8% are in local government coffers. And with that 8%, we're responsible for more than 3/4 of all the infrastructure in Canada. All these local governments trying to deal with roads that are deteriorating, and of course all of the underground services, and we spend millions and millions every year on infrastructure.
Well, it is important for the federal government to have good wine cellars. Let's not be too critical.
Yeah, well, it's a very big issue for us, and how we approach it is very important. Now, when I first came on the council, and that's back in 2002. We were way behind on our infrastructure. It had been left far too long, and there hadn't been enough attention being focused on it. And then we had to go through a period of really significant tax increases just to generate enough revenue to deal with trying to get back caught up. And now we're in much better shape, but even now we're still not nearly where we want to be. And there's only so much you can do with the limited resources you have. Now, budgeting, we've taken a very, what I would call, fiscally conservative approach. And we actually have significant reserves, about $6 million that are there. We have about $12 million in the bank. Now, that sounds like we've got lots of money to spend, but again, 1 or 2 infrastructure projects can eat that all up. And we have a capital plan that we've laid out on a priority basis, taking care of the really important work first, which of course is typically related to water infrastructure, making sure you have safe, clean drinking water. And we're in a good shape. We've really tried to avoid borrowing wherever we could, and our debt loads are very low for a city, and most of that is actually from a time before even I was on council. So we're moving in the right direction, and we want to continue to move in that direction, but we have some challenges, and it's going to require some really hard decisions, and we're going to have to come up with the very best possible solutions for our community to actually be able to support the things that we're doing.
So if people want to get a hold of you to talk a little bit more in detail about some of your ideas and your plan, how do they do that?
Well, there's a number of ways they can do that. I'm on Facebook under Burger for Parksville, which is my slogan. You can certainly look me up there. I have a cell phone. You can call it at any time. It's 250-240-8255, which spells talk, by the way, 240-TALK. And certainly you can ask questions, and I'm more than happy to discuss any of the issues that we face or any of the concerns that come from any of our residents. That's what I'm here for. I'm very accessible, always have been, and certainly I invite anyone to give me a shout if they have a question or a concern.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.